Welcome to this explainer. Okay, we are jumping right in today because we're starting with a scenario that requires your immediate attention. I want you to really picture this. You are standing beside a railway switch in a quiet, uncluttered environment. In the distance, a runaway trolley is hurtling down the tracks and its brakes have completely failed. Ahead of you, the tracks split. On the main path, 5 people are tied down. They're distant, completely unaware of the danger headed their way. Now on the side track, a single individual stands alone. You're right there in the foreground, hand hovering near the lever. You aren't panicking, but you are experiencing an agonizing internal moral conflict. It's a true test of ethics and responsibility. It's just you, the lever, and an absolutely terrible choice to make.
So here's the crux of the whole thing. You have exactly 10 seconds to make the ultimate choice. If you do absolutely nothing, the trolley just continues on its natural path, and 5 people will die. But if you pull that lever, you switch the tracks. You save the 5. But you actively cause the trolley to kill the 1 person on the sidetrack. The clock is ticking. Do you intervene and become personally responsible for 1 death, or do you step back, wash your hands of it, and allow 5 deaths to happen?
That brings us to our next section, utilitarianism versus deontology, the war in your head. What you're experiencing right now is a massive clash between 2 heavy-hitting philosophical frameworks. On one side, we have utilitarianism. Championed by thinkers like Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, this philosophy is, well, it's all about the math. It argues that the morally correct choice is simply the one that minimizes total harm and maximizes general well-being. So, a strict utilitarian, they'd pull the lever without a second thought. Sacrificing 1 to save 5 is just the best mathematical outcome. But then, on the other side, we have deontology. Rooted deeply in the ideas of Immanuel Kant, this framework focuses on absolute rules and duties, totally regardless of the consequences. A deontologist would argue that you have a fundamental, unbreakable moral duty not to actively kill an innocent person. If you pull the lever, your hands are no longer clean. You're actively committing a prohibited act, even if your intentions are to save others. You might think this is just some viral internet puzzle, but it's actually a profound philosophical tool with deep historical roots. The conceptual foundation dates all the way back to the 13th century with the theologian Thomas Aquinas. But the modern trolley problem as we know it today was first formulated in 1967 by British philosopher Philippa Foot. Later on, in 1985, philosopher Judith Jarvis Thomson expanded on it, adding some crazy layers of complexity that we'll explore in just a second. And today, this exact debate has leaped straight from philosophy classrooms into the cutting-edge labs of modern artificial intelligence.
To really grasp how this all started, we have to look at the doctrine of double effect. This was originally conceived by Aquinas when he was trying to justify self-defense. He argued that, hey, if you defend yourself and accidentally kill your attacker, it's justified because your intent was self-preservation, right? Not murder. The death was a foreseen but totally unintended side effect. Fast forward to 1967, and Philippa Foot applied this exact doctrine to complex medical ethics, specifically regarding abortion. She used the runaway trolley scenario to distinguish between actions where harm is just an unintended consequence, like redirecting a trolley, versus actions where harm is directly intended.
All right, let's mix things up a bit. Section 7, the bridge variation, changing the rules.
So here is Judith Jarvis Thomson's famous 1985 variation. The setup is pretty similar. A trolley is speeding toward 5 helpless workers. But this time, you aren't standing by a switch. You're standing on a footbridge directly over the tracks. And right next to you is a very large, heavy-set man. The only way to stop the trolley and save the 5 workers is to actually push this man off the bridge. His mass will stop the train, but, he'll die in the process. Mathematically speaking, the outcome is exactly the same. 1 life traded for 5. But the action required to get there, it is drastically, intimately different.
So, I've got to ask you again, would you push the man? If you pulled the lever in the first scenario because 5 lives are worth more than 1, does that exact same logic hold up when you have to use your own bare hands to push someone to their death? If you're suddenly feeling a little hesitant, you are definitely not alone. As an analysis by Tarrant Leblanche points out, a vast majority refuse to push the large man. It's a fascinating psychological twist. In that first scenario, pulling a lever feels like a cold, impersonal, rational calculation. But the bridge variant? That requires active, direct, physical harm. Our brains are literally hardwired with an intense emotional aversion to committing direct violence against an innocent person. Suddenly, that cold utilitarian math is completely overridden by our deep-seated emotional and moral intuitions. Which leads us perfectly into Section 11, Mice and Real Choices, the Boston Experiment. So to find out how people actually behave, psychologist Dries Bosten from the University of Ghent set up an incredibly stressful experiment. He took the dilemma entirely out of the abstract and made it uncomfortably real for 300 volunteers. Here's the setup. Participants were placed in front of 2 cages. One cage held 5 mice, the other held just 1. A 20-second countdown began. They were told that if they did nothing, the 5 mice would receive a painful electric shock. But if they pressed a button before the timer ran out, the shock would be redirected to the single mouse. Now, quick side note here. The shocks were entirely fake, but the participants fully believed the danger was real. The stakes were suddenly very, very tangible. Now, when researchers asked a separate group what they thought they would do in this scenario, only 66% predicted they'd press the button to shock the single mouse. But in the live, ticking clock simulation, a massive 84% actually pushed the button to save the 5. When faced with a high-stress, real-world scenario, people behaved far more like strict utilitarians than they ever predicted they would. And this leads us to a stunning conclusion, perfectly captured by Dries Bosten himself. What people think does not predict what they would actually do. It turns out that our abstract moral posturing, the way we like to think of ourselves in a calm, hypothetical setting, often completely collapses when a threat becomes a sudden, adrenaline-fueled reality. But here's the thing. Taking action didn't mean it felt good. Even though 84% of the participants made the utilitarian choice to save the 5 mice, their reactions were heavily conflicted. Participants exhibited severe moral distress. They felt intense guilt. Bosten noted it was fascinating to watch people who felt they had made the good decision practically begging for forgiveness, actively apologizing to the researchers afterward. Doing the math just didn't erase the heavy burden of actively causing harm.
Now let's look at Section 16, Modern Real-World Trolleys, from Tracks to Technology. Because the trolley problem isn't just a game, right? It's the blueprint for real-world life-or-death decisions. History is absolutely full of these impossible calculations. During World War II, the British government used misinformation to intentionally divert German bombs away from densely populated central London, guiding them instead toward the less populated South London suburbs. They sacrificed the few to save the many. We see the exact same utilitarian math cited by leaders defending the 1945 atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, arguing that causing immense civilian harm ended the war faster and saved millions of lives overall. We've even seen this during recent pandemics, when public health officials had to decide who gets a life-saving ventilator when there just aren't enough to go around. Do you save the youngest, the one most likely to survive? The moral math is literally everywhere. And today, the trolley problem is occurring inside the artificial intelligence of autonomous, driverless cars. Look at the steps these machines go through every single fraction of a second. Step 1. Detect an unavoidable crash. Say the car's brakes fail, just like our original trolley. Step 2. Calculate the harm. If the car goes straight, it hits a group of 5 pedestrians. If it swerves, it hits a concrete wall, likely killing the single driver. Step 3. The AI must execute a maneuver. But how does it choose? It chooses based entirely on the ethics we program into it. Which means software engineers are now forced to be moral philosophers. They literally have to translate utilitarianism and deontology into lines of code. Do we build a utilitarian AI that minimizes total casualties? If so, the car might be programmed to sacrifice you, its owner and driver, by driving you into a wall to save a crowd of strangers. Or do we program a deontological AI, a car governed by strict rules that says it must never actively steer off its path to intentionally hit something, even if staying the course results in a much higher death toll? So the runaway trolley is no longer just a drawing on a chalkboard. It's hurtling down our streets right now, guided by code. The ultimate question we have to ask ourselves as we step into this automated future is this: what ethical algorithm is guiding our future? And when the time comes, whose hand do you really want resting on the lever? Thank you for exploring this explainer with me. Keep questioning the choices around you.